Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 73. Now, for the people in the future who are watching this in playlist view, I just want to explain what happened between the two previous parts. We had the release of Champions, the end of the Icebrood Saga, and in tandem with it, the devs did a big article talking about the next quarter for Guild Wars 2 that did include a bit of End of Dragons news, and in fact that's going to be the subject I'll get into in a second. It was largely a post, as far as End of Dragons is concerned, as an announcement of an announcement. Turns out it's going to be another 3 months until July 29th before apparently they hit us with a tidal wave of news. So really disappointing from this series' perspective. As self-interested as I am here, it would be kind of nice if we had, you know, a slower trickle. Looks like we'll have 3 months of End of Dragons Daily. Hopefully there's some kind of article. And there is a little something, some concept art you have to go with. And then there's going to be some mental episodes once this tidal wave lands. We'll see exactly what the devs have planned at that point. So that's July 29th, and we're traveling along with that. It's also a pretty big, pretty controversial, and honestly upsetting period of time for the game for me, because of course the final patch itself came out, and I guess if you're watching this in the future, you know it was a really rubbish patch that basically, guys, has really dampened my enthusiasm for End of Dragons. I mean, genuinely, seriously. Not necessarily that it was a crunched release that kind of conned me out of seeing more of Primordus, who I'm a bit of a big fanboy of, but specifically the fact that they chose not to course correct or change the Icebrood Saga story before End of Dragons. That signal that really they are done with the Elder Dragon story and probably Guild Wars 2 in general. The meaning behind that, the meaning behind the fact they never course corrected, they clearly didn't have the budget or time to do this massive scope story, and they rushed through it anyway. That's a really big telegraph about their intentions for the whole franchise. The idea of doing Guild Wars 2 long term and after the Cantha expansion. Remember, it didn't have to be called End of Dragons. They were conceiving of all this at the same time. The idea that after the Cantha expansion, we would then return to Primordus and Jormag was not an option. They do not want this story going on for those long terms in this game. That realization, that weighs on me. And that's like bound to how we feel about End of Dragons. What that means, you know, most of the time when you buy into an MMO and an MMO expansion, there's like an expectation that MMO is going to go on a long time. You'll get a lot of value for money. It'll be like a home for you. And Guild Wars always has been a value for money, and I do still generally stand that End of Dragons will offer us something. But it's kind of a fundamental shift, really, in the X-Pack and what we feel about Guild Wars 2. And as I mentioned, I did a big People Watching the Future critique of the final patch. It's like when in Guild Wars 1 they ended it with a cliffhanger for Primordus and like the Scepter of Ore and stuff, and none of that ended up mattering. If in End of Dragons they end up doing a cliffhanger for whatever comes next, whether that's a new game or just a whole new story, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to buy it anymore. I was previously really excited about the idea of right around the credits of End of Dragons, some big exciting new initiative, but now I do feel kind of limp about it. Maybe it will fade over the coming days, and I'm probably not as doom and gloomy as most people think I am, but you know, there are certain things that need to be said. There were some criticisms of my response, I'll have to say. Like I just mentioned, I probably am a little bit too much of a Primordus fanboy. To be fair, I think the main effect of my Primordus fanboyism did more to affect the script than the reality. What it meant was I talked more about Primordus in that video. If I had chosen to, I could have talked about how done dirty Jormag was in the finale of the Icebrood Saga and highlighted more of how disgusting it is that the supposedly intelligent, smart creature that's a schemer just gets used as a prop in the finale. You know, I think one low-budget thing they at least could have done to improve that final fight would have been to have had Aurene and Jormag having a discussion while the battle's going on. You know, instead of it all being about Ryland and Bram. One thing that really struck me about the Morgemoth battle was him talking about embracing Oblivion. Hell, the thing that really made the Kraukatoric fight, if you really think about it, is this interplay between Kraukatoric speaking to you and Kraukatoric's torment, the whispering about Mother. We got none of that. And especially a character like Jormag that's all about being composed and about your motivations and always pushing it onto you. You put a character like that into a life or death situation, the facade comes down. It could have been really riveting. That's all dialogue, that's all voice acting. We got none of it. So I don't think this is entirely me being blinded by the fact that I just really, really like Prime Orders. Also, some people talked about the fact that the bow wasn't there, and maybe that doesn't even matter because the bow was never meant to matter in the end. I would say that makes the Bitterfrost Frontiers storyline and the crack in the ice and, you know, all the stuff with the tooth kind of a waste of time too, but, you know, that was concepted when they thought they had more breathing room with the Icebrood Saga, so maybe you're okay. But yeah, it was a really bad release. I'm not feeling very good. And to be honest, it's been an interesting few days. I can't believe that my basically late-ass video, in this era where I do like these scripted, later video releases, and most people just stream their experience straight away, or in the case of the Guild Wars 2 scene in the partner program, they all play it early, they all know what it is early. I don't engage in that, but they pre-bake their releases and then throw them out to you as soon as possible to try and get ahead of the queue. My late video is basically what spearheaded any kind of critical response to that release. Like, that's astounding to me. I don't know whether it's... and we had the poll with the heavy average rating. I don't know if it's just this game's community and our standards have dropped. People don't strive for anything better. Maybe it's the whole MMO industry. I mean, really, my experiences in other MMOs are telling me that things could be a lot better and people kind of don't argue for them. I would encourage people, too, to be wary of snake oil around about now and the conspicuous absence of real conversation on this one. There's this little thing on the horizon called an End of Dragons affiliate link, and basically I think people want you to want End of Dragons as much as possible, even if there are obvious signals about what's happening with the game. I don't know how much I should really be talking about this at the start of an End of Dragons Daily, but I would just say watch out. I've been a bit dismayed for a few reasons these past few days. I don't know, maybe I really shouldn't talk about this. It's messing with my livelihood too, to a certain degree. I've seen what being serious and overly ranty can do to YouTubers in the past. Maybe I should just keep it light and frothy and jokey, but I think I should do better than that. I don't know if that's really me. Anyway, right, let's talk about what we're doing for the next few parts. This one is going to be just a few comments. One of the reasons that I want to do that is so that I can get one day ahead for the people on the early uploads. The other thing that I want to do is we got concept art. We got like 3 pieces of concept art from ArenaNet themselves. And then there was a massively OP article. I think I'll actually pause this video mid-recording to see what their release said. They obviously got something of an inside scoop because they got some extra media. So in total, I think there's like 5 or 6 new pieces of End of Dragons concept art, which is actually similar to what we saw at Christmas with the previous information batch. They actually had that in-game render of the mysterious Cantha lady. Wasn't that an in-game render? And back then, you'll of course remember that a lot of the speculation we could do was actually about the file names. ArenaNet kind of released those too, and there were kind of cryptic hints there. This time, as far as I can tell, all the file names are just random strings of letters and numbers. Now, maybe that's like an anagram or something, or, you know, during the War in Kryta era of Guild Wars 1, that would certainly be true, and there's hints to find. But I don't know whether ArenaNet's really done that here. And what that means is that there's really a lot less to say. I'm just basically going to be able to say, oh, this is a pretty picture. We can't really get a video out of it. So what I want to do instead, here's my genius. We will open each End of Dragons daily for the next, like, week with one of these new pieces of concept art, and we'll give a little bit of a discussion about it. And you guys can jump the gun if you like. Check the concept art online first, and then if you have really interesting thoughts or you think I might miss something, you can put it in the comments. I'll highlight even your conversation about that. So we can get a little bit of, like, extra value in the next upcoming days because there's this concept art and because we got to wait until July 29th. I got to stretch it out a little bit. Man, I really do have to sit down and brainstorm some proper topics so we get on track here. All right, so I just got back from Google. Or actually, more specifically, I Googled, went to Massively, couldn't find the article. Went to the Spot Discord, and you guys helped me out immediately. And I got linked to a couple of different articles that did include the extra concept art. We're looking at one piece in the background here. No of these publication sites actually have additional information. So I don't know why they have additional screenshots, or sorry, concept art, but not facts. I would have thought there'd be some kind of statement from the devs, maybe interview access or something. There really wasn't any of that. I guess it was just a little press package that got sent around in the hopes that they'll report on it. I specifically pulled the art here. I'll give these guys a plug. WCCFtech.com. Never heard of them before. Is that me out of the loop, or are these guys like kind of small fish? In any case, especially if they're small fish, thanks to them, and I'll give them a little plug there, I suppose. Right, so this is piece number 1. I'm just going to go in order. You know, we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you guys want to predict what art is coming in the later episodes and then talk a little bit about it, you're more than welcome to. On this occasion, we get the Echovald. This is actually not that high resolution, and no source I can find has it a very high one. I do actually know some pretty interesting upsampling techniques, and even one that will animate static images. My whole lore project from earlier in the year was going to be making videos out of concept art that maybe we could apply to this. But exactly as ArenaNet's offered it, it's here. What actually strikes me here is this feels a lot closer to the Guild Wars 1 Echovald concept art, which is important. I think the other concept art dumps we've had, and especially if you look at like the nature of the art on the loading screens during the Icebrood Saga and stuff, was kind of a new art style, obviously because it's being drawn by new talent and it's kind of changing a bit. But whoever's doing this is emulating the old style really quite well, I think. The actual structure of the environment's really captivating here because it's one of the big Echovald cathedrals or monasteries, whatever, that we'd be able to go into, but it's hanging in the treetops. That looks like a waterfall and a massive plunge below. Something a bit like maybe Jacket Itzel from Heart of Thorns, except on a way bigger scale. Now, if this is one of those moments where, you know, in the original Guild Wars 2 cutscene trailer that we see Divinity's Reach in concept art and then it turns almost 1-for-1 into an in-game render. Now, if this is that's incredible. I would love to explore this place. I'll tell you what it reminds me of as well. One of those areas in Vabi where there's quite a big structure kind of hanging over a mine. One of the bounty board collections is near there. You guys might remember, sort of left area of the map. So if this actually gets translated, this is beautiful. On the other hand, though, you know, it might not be at all. Some of that POF concept art really doesn't translate in game at all. Like, for example, you think about the Amnoon concept art. It kind of shows this big city. We're quite high up on some kind of fortress, and there's just nothing but unending dunes and desert in the distance. When you actually get in game, it really doesn't feel like that at all. So we'll see whether this one actually ends up translating very well. There's actually some other art coming up in the later parts that is of a very different style and really seems to be guiding model creation and stuff. There's even handwritten annotations in a few situations, which is nice. Another thing I kind of want to show you guys as a tack on here, because the finale did just come out and we've been talking about the fact that we really only got to see these Elder Dragons' heads. You might have missed this, but there was a tweet from a concept artist who had fleshed out full bodies for Primordus and Jormag. 4 art pieces that were tweeted out. They're all fascinating. I feel so bad. I want to say again, the finale was a really, really phenomenal piece in terms of the cinematography, the coloring, the texture, the sense of scale. It was very, very good. But I still feel really bad for the people who put all that effort in and some of this stuff that never made it at all. Because really, look at this piece of Primordus. Now, I like this. Imagine this, but at the scale where, you know, we saw its head was like the size of a map before. Now imagine this whole body to scale underneath that. You know, this is like what Monster Hunter did with Zora Magdaros, except way bigger. And I kind of like how you can almost get a sense that he is the lava, that he's emerging from it. I did have a comment from someone saying, you know, inconsistency in Primordus' design doesn't matter much because maybe he can just shift with the shape of the lava and he can mold himself however he likes, as he's an entity of magma, so to speak. And I get that from this concept art. It really does just feel like he could be flowing out of a larger body. And, you know, if there was ever a map that they'd properly done in the depths of Tyria, where all is dark around him and all his light and this heat is emanating from him, this could have been very, very badass. And we also have this shot here as well. Oh, by the way, some people thought that Primordus looked a little bit Godzilla-esque, and I suppose that's fair. You know, kind of a big lumbering dragon. That is a design of Elder Dragon we haven't really come across yet. And then you have Jormag, who, in general, I think as it came across in game, Jormag's actually much more interesting to look at as more going on, because the hands are well made and so on. But as far as being a unique design, they really didn't do much here. I'm very curious to see what they'll go with End of Dragons concept for the deep sea dragon. Is it going to be a giant kraken? Is it going to be like a salt spray? Or are they going to leave that with just Kunavang? That's the big question. Obviously, Kraukatoric didn't look much like Vlast on Aurene. And then after ascending to become an Elder Dragon, Aurene doesn't look like any of them again. So I see no reason why the Deep Sea Dragon or Mother or whatever else is going on has to be of the salt spray aesthetic at all, you know. Oh, by the way, this is kind of tangentially related. Another thing, why was the patch called Judgment? Really? Why? We did so much speculation about it. There's absolutely nothing. All I've seen is people be able to come up with jokes. I mean, talking about Coda coming into this patch in recent videos, fat chance of that. What a joke that looks like, me saying that last week in review of what actually happened. My God. All right, let's stop ranting. Let's get into your questions. Now, these have been sourced from the End of Dragons Daily before all of the news. That's kind of why I want to keep this part short as well, so that, you know, we can get to this new state of the game and get some fresher commentary. Let's see what we got. Haunted by Moonlight with a quick comment on the videos. Could just be me, but the in-game SFX for the adventure box seems to be there in the audio. I can't remember it being there in the previous version. It reminds me of having a conversation with friends while you're playing a game in the background. Super nostalgic vibes. As always, I'm constantly messing with my mic and audio balance and levels and stuff. And yeah, one of the things I've been wanting to play with is just having the game audio back there. So that's what I did with SAB. I didn't really have any complaints, but you're the only person who noticed. So I don't know whether it was a value add. I'll try it a couple more times and see what happens. I won't be mentioning it in the audio track. I'll just be looking to see any response in the comments. As always, you guys can always feel free to talk about stuff like this. Bretzel as well on the competition I set up. Hey WP, I'm interested in creating that Super Adventure Box fan map creation, but is there a deadline for it? I don't know how quickly I should be working on it. There's no deadline. It's open till the end of time or until I quit covering Guild Wars 2. And I plan to be fighting for this game as long as I can, so no rush, but obviously it'd be cool to see it in something of a short time scale. Sigorian says, and you're racing other people, obviously. Do you think the Dragon Response mission like content and strikes like Forging Steel have a place in endgame PvE moving forwards? A lot of people feel their gameplay and presentation are just somewhat boring with their current iteration and thus avoid them. However, I feel like there are a lot of possibilities with repeatable story through gameplay format, something that isn't just dungeons and raids. How do you believe they would work best to complement the game's content as a general concept? Yeah, I think they have a place long term. I think that if these DRMs weren't taking place on established maps, people would be head over heels in love with them. And that's the kind of thing that when they're building new maps and we're going into new expansions, they can do. They can like cordon off an area and say, okay, the first time you explore this will be in this DRM. Maybe then unlock it in the open world as an equivalent if you want to be efficient about assets. But I do think that they're really strong. I think that any problems of boredom people have is from doing too many of them back to back and too quickly, which is what Champions has all been about. And to a certain degree, it is about the game's combat flow, which I don't hold in that high regard. I view the build craft options and the, you know, the weight and the impact and the responsiveness of the combat to be high, but the actual difference in combat experiences as you play through, how different it feels to fight a destroyer versus an Icebrood and stuff like that, isn't that significant, so they get boring quick. And if the devs can resolve stuff like that, more regular break bars, more well-telegraphed, interesting animations, and small beats that are different as we play through, I think they can really prop DRMs up. Any problem with DRM is a problem with combat that feels too repetitive, or environments that feel too repetitive, and maybe to a certain degree the event structure, but I think the devs did okay with that as well. I genuinely would love to see them in End of Dragons. I really would. I think, you know how Path of Fire was broken into like 4 acts? Heart of Thorns was 3? Each act can have a Dragon Response mission. It doesn't have to be called a DRM, but that format, perfect. And I think the final boss of this expansion as well can do something like what we've just seen with the Dragonstorm in the Icebrood Saga. Believe it or not, guys, I actually think strike missions, had they gone further with them and tuned them better, are great. I think the Dragon Response missions are great. I think that this Dragonstorm thing is great. I actually think a lot of really powerful and decent developments and lessons have been learned from the Icebrood Saga. I really do. I think that there's been some genius stuff implemented. There are things that have come from the Icebrood Saga that can inform the future of Guild Wars 2 and make it really beautiful. That is, if ArenaNet wants to do that. And see my discussion at the start of the video. Ethereal Joy commenting on the Guildhall discussion. I need ArenaNet to release a new Guildhall location set in some large meadow or field. Well, that sounds like Xingjie to me to a certain degree. I have so many Drizzlewood War Supply tokens saved up to furnish a few forests in Guildhalls. Nearly 1,000 trees waiting to be planted. Also, I want the height limit increased. I like to stack the trees on top of each other to make super trees, and then I'll build some tree houses. You know what? That reminds me of, you guys might not know this about me, but I played quite a lot of Ark Survival Evolved, and in one of their maps, the Aberration map, they have this like tree house structure that you can build or embed in cliffs and stuff, but only certain trees are compatible. You've completely reminded me of that, and that's kind of a really fun item. What I really want to comment on here, though, is the concept that scribe-related tokens and decorations will be ported wholesale into housing. Now, from a matter of efficiency and immediately having a huge bulk of objects to play with, I think this is a good idea. But I think there's a lot of like nitty-gritty things the devs have to figure out about acquisition with this. Like, are they going to make us level scribe to nearly max and spend, you know, like 50 gold on a single chair, you know, that we've upgraded from several other chairs? Or are they going to refine it and make it matrices and so on? Like, what exactly do they do? Are Super Adventure Box furniture tokens 1-for-1 translatable? Are the raid tokens and the fractal tokens translatable but scribing different? Like, I wonder how the devs would do this. But the idea that you can actually take just those literal drizzlewood trees but put them in your own instance now instead of a guild hall, I hadn't considered at all. I really hadn't. And now you say it like it's the default idea. And I think I'm with you. This would be a very, very good way of kickstarting that feature. Trevor says, do you think they'll do anything novel with minis in End of Dragons? I was just looking at the neat ones you can get from the tickets now, and I want to collect some, but it feels kind of pointless. A mini game would be the top tier choice, and a housing option for display would be a good second tier. But are there any other low to medium effort ideas to encourage people like me to actually get them? So yeah, I do agree with your tier list. At the very top has got to be Polymock, using mini pets as a mini game, allow people to trade them, allow them to put minis up as collateral, a bit like cards in Triple Triad or something. This would really work very well. I don't know whether Guild Wars 2 will ever get it. Particularly, I'm doubting whether End of Dragons has that in its sights. I mean, the price we've paid in the Icebrood Saga is so great. I kind of want to believe that there's a ton of stuff like this in the next X pack, but we have to draw the line somewhere, and I'm not seeing it. Low tier choices. Well, maybe you could watch my mini pet video from last month, which reminds me, by the way, I'm going to be doing my tonic video now that my new PC's in. I think I suggested in that one a randomized function for minis. This is something Final Fantasy XIV has, I've noticed. They call it minion roulette, I think. And what it basically means is every time you hit a loading screen or go somewhere new or do something new, it randomizes the one that comes out. I really adore that idea. I especially adore that idea in conjunction with a feature that makes all those minis based on characters speak. You know how, like, a Revenant, if they stand around for a while, a bit of idle dialogue will come up? They should slap some idle dialogue like that onto a ton of the minis in the game. Like, if you've got Mini Traherne, every now and then, he should come out with one of those classic Traherne lines, you know, which maybe some people hate, but at least is iconic. And then if you have this with all these characters, let's say I'm doing fractals, I load in on a fractal, everyone's minis randomized, and we have a mini Ritlock with us, we have a mini Traherne, we have a mini Revenant Ritlock with us, and they're all like talking and commenting every now and then as we play through it. It'd be like a sub party is with us. I really like that concept. Final Fantasy XIV just in general has a lot of beautiful things with their minion system that put Guild Wars 2's to shame. Like proper animations when they come out. They have minions that actually like interact with you. There's a butterfly that will land on your character if you stand still. None of the Guild Wars 2 minis do anything like that. In general, I think just bigger minis too, and the player housing thing. Being able to demonstrate them, have them run around in a farm that I can call my own or something like that. Replace all those cats in my home instance with minis instead. And it's not a Ratasum now, it's at a place of my choosing. Is a brilliant feature. Again, kind of revolving around that concept of why do we have people visiting these places on the regular? Maybe some kind of function where that's your default login area now or something. I mean, this game doesn't have the idea of rest XP and all that kind of stuff, so I don't know. Gabor says, hey WP, I just realized you might not be responding to questions posted on the 2021 summer video, so I'm posting it here instead. Good job, because I wouldn't have looked there for End of Dragons comments. I do read them, but I wouldn't have been collecting them specifically for voice responses. Do you think we'll ever see a slumbering version of Aurora and Vision without the purple balls? Same idea as the World vs. World and PvP legendaries, but reversed. You throw Aurora and Vision into the Mystic Forge with some currencies and whatnot, and then you get a new legendary without the effect. Simple, elegant, optional. Well, first of all, I think this is very appropriate as a release before End of Dragons, not necessarily End of Dragons itself. I actually think you might find this functionality as a part of the armory. It makes sense to me that if they're adding this new UI and infrastructure and you can toggle these weapons across all characters at once. Don't forget, these trinkets are legendaries. They will be in the armory in some kind of checkbox that is enable effects, disable effects. That works because even though there is the option with the World vs. World and PvP ones, it's still not good because once you choose to have the visuals, you can never go back. There's not like a reverse process. That's it. So no matter what world you're living in, it's clunky. And I've never really liked that those World vs. World and PvP ones, like, you want the final tier to feel complete. You want to feel like you've gone the whole way through the progression. But in doing that, you've irrevocably broken the aesthetic of your character if you don't like the way those orbs look. And that kind of sucks, you know. It sucks that people have been put in that position. I don't mind, because I think you're going to look like a mess anyway, even after your single first legendary. You're stacking 2 of them, let alone once you've got all the trinkets and stuff. But so, yeah, I think it's incomplete everywhere, and the armory could be the place that fixes it. They've been vague on details, how it'll look and stuff. The armory's coming a lot closer than maybe we thought. I made a bit of a mistake in my video coverage. I guess they do have a date for the armory, and it will be before End of Dragon, so that's when I'm expecting this. Fingers crossed. Authentic Matt says, "Hey WP, I want your take. Do you think moving forward past End of Dragons that ArenaNet should focus on smaller stories? Whether that be in Guild Wars 2 or on a future project. I played Guild Wars 1 at launch, and I felt like I enjoyed each campaign so much more than a lot of the content in Guild Wars 2, excluding Path of Fire. And I think that's because while the stories were all connected, they all had their own story. They felt more like movies in a franchise, whereas Guild Wars 2 mostly feels like a very long TV show to me. I even love the Elder Dragon storyline, but it still felt entirely too slow for my liking. I guess what I'm asking for is that in the future, ArenaNet decides to focus on more delivering an entire single story at a time with a more basic overarching theme, or just creates individual stories that move from one to the next. Do you think this would have worked better for Guild Wars 2? I also feel like part of the problem is how long it takes to get each episode of The Living World. In general, we wait 2 to 3 months for 2 hours of content, making it take 1.5 years to 2 years to get one whole story. And at the end of that time, we don't even always kill an Elder Dragon. I love 3 in Path of Fire, but it ended up taking 4 years to kill Kralkatorrik after Morgemoth, and 3 years between Zaitan and Morgemoth before that. Even if we killed a dragon every single Living World season and expansion, that still seems to me like a very long time to resolve one overall story. I apologize if you've said how you feel about these things before, but I've missed it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on these points. Okay, I've got a lot of thoughts. First of all, and this is not unique to me, but one thing that's kind of dawned on me reading a lot of the criticism and response over the past few days is there is a version of Guild Wars 2 where they established the Elder Dragons as entities as strong as they are, but never made the game about fighting back against them. Like, the concept of actually fighting back against them was just completely ludicrous. They'd never actually go away. And it's within that world. So you get all the world building joy out of it. You get an interesting setting, but you're not shackled to these very, very difficult, intangible, weird, like, big scale plot lines. And that would have freed the devs in a lot of ways. Now, this is one of those things where I have hindsight of seeing how Guild Wars 2 went for 10 years. I probably never would have advocated for this concept back in the day, just as obviously the studio itself didn't. But that would have been an interesting way of doing it. And to specifically look at your main point, yes, I do think Guild Wars 2 would have done a lot better with more specifically segmented, separate stories that share the same universe but are their own thing. And if you think about it, that's exactly what Guild Wars 1 did. Yes, at the very end of Nightfall, they had some side quests most people missed that did rein in the story of the Lich and the story of the Fortune Teller into the Abaddon arc. They did kind of tie it together for the Lorehounds, but in general, and especially for the level that most average fans enjoyed the story back then, that was not transparent, and people were just experiencing different stories in different areas of the world. And then Eye of the North was a bunch of new subject material as well. ArenaNet kind of had already nailed that. Utopia would have been nailing that to a certain degree as well. I think in the modern era, Elder Scrolls Online is a great example of how you can tell these separate stories. You just kind of go to a different region. There's a specific threat each time. And what that does is that allows people to jump in and jump out more freely. It reduces the baggage of stuff that you have to play through, which is very much in line with ArenaNet's idea of not forcing you to wait around to have fun and always being able to party with people. There are some like quality of life access philosophies in Guild Wars 2 that don't gel with the idea of telling one long epic story as they have been doing. So I think it's a good idea. And for all that I'm complaining about how much they've hand-waved Jormag and Primordis and all that with this recent release, the truth is, if their ambition is to stay with Guild Wars 2, it's just they desperately want to get to single individual little packet stories like Elder Scrolls Online does and like your comments just proposed, I actually view that as a very, very bright future for Guild Wars 2, if that's what they're doing. I'm just not convinced that's true. I think they want to move us to a whole new game where, again, they might take this stance, so that could be good as well. But I do think there's a lot of value in it, absolutely. The other thing I would say is, we refer to these as small stories. What you're really referring to is like a short story. Some people think that the Elder Dragon story is just bad because it's too big. You know, it's too cosmic. You want to get back to individuals. I don't necessarily think it's too cosmic. I think this could be a story about, you know, an epic war, you know, a Guild Wars equivalent of like World War II or something. That's still a massive story. That's not a personal story. but it all comes down to the devs' delivery. You know, they could do a really personal thing about just a couple of characters exploring a forest, and that takes a whole expansion. I really do believe that's sellable. It's all about the execution and, you know, how you descale from what this game has currently been given its community to something like that forest idea. That's a real challenge at this point. Again, another reason why they might be looking to draw a line under everything. 2 more about the trailer, which remember may still have Easter eggs. Super says, what's with all the pink mist and clouds in the Cantha trailer in the first batch of artwork? The bubbles float in the air too? Throughout, I get a sense that although we're in Cantha, Cantha might not be interior. Maybe ArenaNet is reviving some of the Utopia ideas about traveling to the mists. I checked Ritlock's Path of Fire mist flashback cutscene to compare, and they do seem a bit different, but still, it could explain the lack of content with Cantha, but the stories of missing sailors, Timey mentions, counters that. Yeah, the idea that the whole continent devastated somehow and has been floating around in the mists. If this was 3 days ago, I might have said that's a cool idea. Maybe the end of the Icebrood Saga will have so much chaos it launches the continent off into the mists, and it's now just a fragment of reality, and we've got to go tether it back to the world, and that's why the Aether Blades are important. But, you know, they did no such thing. So I don't know. I do think it's probably a vision. It might be a scrying pool moment. It might just be the opening cutscene. You know, like with Path of Fire, we had those moments with Ella McKay in Lion's Arch, and then we moved on. It might just be some equivalent of that. It's just Aureen showing it to us in the Eye of the North. Who knows, really? And then here, an amazing comment from Vulgrim in regards to the Easter eggs. Here are some more hints. There's an eye symbol on the top part of the first gate. It looks like the Richless class symbol. There's MMXXI written on a bell, which if you look at Northerner's response, I've cropped it in here, it says, don't know about you, but Ruby saying End of Dragons 2021 pretty much confirms the release year. So MMXXI on the bell wasn't that needed. So yeah, that's 2021. I do actually remember people talking about that right when the trailer came out. Calling written on the dragon. Banners with an unknown symbol, perhaps the Aether Blades. A bridge written on the right-hand side of this bridge. By the way, when you say it's written, is that New Crichton? Is that what you're talking about? Because why would they be writing in New Crichton in Cantha? Duty written on the tunnel entrance, and Mercy on the dragon pipe. Maybe we can read into those a bit. Interested to hear your guys' thoughts. But for the next topic, guys, as always, give me your comments and thoughts and feedback on anything we discussed today. But also, I do want to prompt you. Here's my main question, and here's what I want to talk about in the next part. How has the finale, and I suppose the accompanying article too, affected your anticipation for the new expansion? How are the events of the past 2 days affected things for you going forward? I want to platform some of those responses, and we'll see what we have there. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you very shortly. They're going to be releasing balance notes very soon, so you might be watching a video on that soon. Thanks all, and I'll see you next time.